What's up, sports fans? Most specifically, what's up, baseball fans? Guys, we got the baseball season starting tomorrow. I know I'm not the only one that is stoked about this. If you want to sign up to be a member of the DFS 5-pack website is below. We got baseball only, $99 special covers the full MLB season. Otherwise, all the other packages, monthly, annual, and lifetime, will cover both sports. So we're going to do baseball and basketball for the next couple of weeks. Football comes back up again in the fall. Probably see how it goes from there. So in the meantime, now with baseball starting tomorrow, we're trying to do a couple of just quick strategy videos just to talk through a few things that always become issues throughout the MLB season. So in basketball, it's late scratches or what's really get to people. The hard part about baseball is going to be evaluating the weather. You know what I mean? When you get one of those close call games, how aggressive do you go on it? Do you completely skip it? And again, guys, I'm just going to remind you, I am not a meteorologist. I have no experience evaluating weather other than what I can read from what other websites tell me. So throughout the season, I'll get people ask me, well, what's the weather like in Baltimore today? Y'all got Google? Just Google it. I mean, that's the most that we can really do if, besides reading the Ross report, looking at other websites, look it up. I mean, I don't have any greater information than that. So you can do our best to try to approach the situation, but I don't typically have any better answers than you're going to get just by looking it up. So I'm far from an expert on this situation. So here are the places I go and what I do to evaluate weather. So this is a website called Daily Baseball Data. I like them for their batter versus pitcher numbers. I like them for their weather information. I think they do a nice job. It's up early too. So while sometimes we have to wait for the Roth report and a few other things, this is usually up in the morning. Is it as accurate? No, not necessarily. But they do a pretty bang up job. So one of the things I like to look at is the wind direction. So we got 16-mile-an-hour winds blowing in at Miami tomorrow. Now, for me, that doesn't mean anything because I know that Miami's going to have a retractable roof, so this may neutralize some weather conditions. But for those of you who are really new to MLB DFS and don't know the stadiums as well, they're even nice enough to put that up there. So that is something that you can pay attention to. Typically, let's pretend that the roof was open and that wasn't something we were worrying about. If I see a 16-mile-an-hour wind blowing in, and I can confirm this with maybe a little bit more of a professional meteorologist like Kevin Roth or any of the other guys you can find on Twitter, I know that's a game where all of a sudden the pitchers get a nice bump up and the hitters get a bump down. In DFS, what kills you or what really helps you? On offense, it's the home run, man. If you can get a couple of home runs, your team's usually good to cash for the day, unless they're all the super chalky guys out there. But I mean, if you can get 3 home runs out of your team for the day, you're usually in a pretty good spot if you don't get your pitchers to tank for you. So I want games that don't have big time winds blowing in. So you look through a couple of these other games, for example, like St. Louis versus the Mets, a 6-mile-an-hour crosswind. I don't take much out of that. 6 miles an hour, not a huge deal. It's blowing right to left, it looks like. Not going to take much out of that, right? Okay. We look at this Pirates versus Tigers game. Again, a 6-mile-an-hour crosswind, maybe a very subtle bump up to left-handed pull hitters, but it's so subtle that I don't really take it into account. However, I do look that they're calling for mass amounts of rain. And if I see this early in the morning, I've already got this one earmarked as something I need to look out for. This gives me some cause for pause going into tomorrow morning on the early slate. However, I will read the Kevin Roth report and other, MLB DFS weather advisors to get a better idea if this is true or not. This is a good starting point for me because it's out really early in the day, but we all know how quickly weather changes. So I'll look through these things, look for any areas of great concern as far as weather, any areas where the wind might play a major factor. Now we're getting to 9 miles an hour blown out at Texas. Okay, subtle bump. Again, nothing that I'm going to be majorly influenced by, but it's a little supporting statistic. If you had like a close call, for example, and one of them's got 9 miles an hour blowing out and one of them's got 9 miles an hour blowing in, I'm going to take that close call and I'm going to look at the wind blowing out. On the off opportunity, somebody hits a long fly ball, one's a little more likely to pop out of the ballpark than the other. But you look through the rest of these, doesn't seem to be any major concerns. One area of note. Okay, Giants at Dodgers. So this one's out in LA, but most specifically, I want to note that San Francisco, and Kevin Roth does a great job of talking about this every single day. San Francisco specifically built their stadium to try to cut down on the wind effect. So you're going to see a lot of days, and this game's in LA, so don't look at this weather stuff right here, but just remember with San Fran that it can get really windy out there, but they built their stadium so it doesn't necessarily help or hurt as much when you got massive winds blown out. So it's still there, but they've specifically built it to not be as big of a deal. So next, guys keep hearing me talk about Kevin Roth. Now he's the guy, he's been doing it for a long time. Go follow this guy on Twitter. If you're not, and then he does a piece for RotoGrinders every single day. So I think most of us know who RotoGrinders is. You better be brand new to the industry or brand new to playing DFS if you don't know who RotoGrinders is. So he will do a daily report, and he tends to update it in the afternoon. This is from, 6 days ago? So I don't put any stock in this. I think he's just itching and ready to go. But usually the write-ups for each game will be a little bit more specific than this. And then he'll have a rating system that's not up there right now, but it's good to know. Red is like high alert. Like that's a game that for me, I'll typically just avoid unless it's like Coors Field. And I think I can get Coors Field at low ownership for the day, which is, generally pretty rare because we all know about the Coors Field factor. Trying to balance between the two of them is a little bit tough. Now, if I get a game that I just love, you might want to take a chance on the day, but this kind of has to be up to you. And that's where it's hard for me to answer these questions for people. They say, well, what should you do here? I can't answer that one for you. It depends on how aggressive you want to be. We all play DFS a little bit differently. I've stated it a million times before. I'm pretty boring and conservative. So if there's potential weather delay or potential weather issues, I will be really cautious with that game, especially with my pitchers, right? We know that if a pitcher pitches 2 innings and then we get a 1.5 hour delay, he usually doesn't come back in, and that can be a big loss for the day. Whereas it takes a lot more to postpone a game, especially like if you see an afternoon game at 1 o'clock, for example, and they're calling for afternoon showers, but then it clears up after that. That game's probably going to get in, and eventually your hitters are going to get to hit. Pitchers, on the other hand, significantly riskier. So that's the best way that I look at it. I'm a pretty boring and conservative DFS player, right? I play a lot of cash games. I like seeing the green. It's a boring way to play. There's not a lot of big scores that go along with it. So I tend to play a little bit more conservative. For y'all who like to go for it, sometimes looking at those high alert weather games and going for the low ownership on the day, if it's a good spot for those guys to be in, I get that. There is definitely some credence in that argument. And if that's how you like to play, that makes sense. Now, talking up Kevin Roth, he's been doing it for a long time, but it doesn't. There are plenty of people out there. So, you just go to Twitter. If you're playing DFS and don't have a Twitter account, you need to have one. It makes life so much easier. Go up to your search bar, type in DFS weather, and there is a bunch of people you can follow. These aren't full-time jobs for these people, so sometimes a full-time job can get in the way, and maybe your secondary or third weather person can get you information a little bit earlier in the day. So that's how I do it. That's how I look at it. I tend to take the be a little bit more cautious approach on weather. Some people like to be a little bit more aggressive, but ultimately, that stems to the player, guys, and we're all going to play a little bit differently, and that is one of the kind of the cool and fun parts about DFS. So a little microcosm of life. Everything's a little different for that selective person. It's up to you how aggressive and how you want to approach it. And if you're not getting great weather on it, Google it. If it's a game in Camden Yards or if it's a game in Baltimore, Google Baltimore weather and look up to see what the local meteorologist says. It's not that difficult. We all have access to the internet. So these things are a lot easier than it would have been back in the day, although we wouldn't have had DFS pre-internet. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So that's how I evaluate weather. I got a couple questions on it yesterday, so I wanted to bring it up and talk through it. That's that. Keep it simple is the way I look at it. So have a good one, guys. If you want to sign up to join the team, we'd love to have you. But looking forward to the start of baseball tomorrow.